Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here and thank you for having me. So before I start, I would like to engage everyone in a thought experiment. Okay, so let's imagine tomorrow there's no more discrimination, no more stigma against any socially marginalized communities. So do you think that would be sufficient for these folks to thrive? Okay. So, do you think just simply getting rid of discrimination and stigma would be sufficient? Okay. Well, yeah. So, thanks for engaging in this. Yeah. So, I hear no. So, that means there's something more. So, what do we need? What's more do we need, right? So, my research suggests that social safeness might be an answer. And I'm going to talk about what that looks like and how it works and why it matters, especially for clinical practice. So, as a counseling psychologist, I'm really interested in understanding the everyday experiences of people that unfolds moment to moment, especially experiences that's contextualized, focusing on folks from different marginalized and multicultural contexts. And so today I'm going to focus on stress and resilience processes, particularly of sexual and gender diverse communities. And I try to contribute to this area of resilience research by integrating a Buddhist psychological lens as well. And today we're particularly focusing on the idea of self-compassion. So, as many of you might be aware, the health and mental health disparities among queer and trans folks have been well documented consistently in the literature. When we think about the increased risk of cardiovascular disease, to increased risk of depression and anxiety among these folks, when we compare to their cis heterosexual peers, oftentimes scholars would kind of try to explain these disparities by referring to the minority stress theory. And what it suggests is that this disparities was rooted more in the prolonged exposure to a variety of minority stressors, right? So think of constantly kind of encountering anti-LGBTQ comments online to maybe overhearing some jokes, maybe targeting queer and trans folks when you casually pass by on the street, right? So the gist here is to kind of think of these presence of minority stressors as a way to explain such disparity. So naturally, my early work was asking, are there anything that would help individuals cope? And so this is one of the pieces that I worked on earlier, where we're focusing on this idea of dispositional self-compassion as a quality internal resources that we thought that it might buffer how people as people navigate their day-to-day minority stress. And the results shows that yes, self-compassion does serve as a buffer, against these day-to-day minority stressors' impact on people's affective well-being. The caveat here for this study is that we conceptualize self-compassion as a disposition, more of a fixed trait. And that actually really limits our understanding, of how resilience works if we think of it as a process that unfolds, over time, moment to moment. So this led us to, our next project where we found that actually recent research really shows that self-compassion doesn't have to be this static quality. It can be fluctuating moment to moment. And we can think of it as a mind state with two modes. Briefly speaking, the first mode is compassionate self-responding, characterized by self-kindness, common humanity, mindfulness as we approach different moments of suffering or difficulties. The other mode is uncompassionate self-responding, characterized by self-judgment, isolation, over-identification instead. So in a more contemplative tradition and practices, folks might kind of cultivate self-compassion by, practicing loving kindness meditation or other compassion-based meditation that helps people build, their self-compassionate mind state. Um, but not everyone is familiar with such practices. And so I was wondering, oh, will there be actually, everyday social situation or context that can help us, explain these fluctuations? So to answer that question, I refer to the social safeness perspective. that's recently proposed that suggests how our human nervous system is actually wired to stay vigilant to potential threats as a basic survival strategy. So what it means is that this vigilance would, not turn off unless we have access to these cues of social safeness. We can refer to events that communicate connectedness, inclusion, and protection that really, people can detect and being able to access. So in the context of queer and trans folks, especially having to navigate environments that typically normalize and centers cis heterosexual experiences, these access to cues of social safeness may be limited, and that put people on, this constant or default state of vigilance, even if there's no apparent threat or active discrimination going on. So you might find people thinking in the back of their mind, is it actually safe for me to be here? Will I be respected? Can I be myself? Questions like that. So to paint a fuller picture, here's one extract, kind of narrative offered by a participant from our project, illustrating what social safeness may look like. She said, I accompanied my partner to see a Chinese medicine practitioner. We sat together and waited. And when it was our turn, the doctor asked if I wanted to go in and listen as well. This made me feel respected. Okay, so let's let it sink in a little bit, right? So as you can see and kind of hear from this participant, even though this moment might seem small, it signals inclusion and recognition of this individual. And from a compassion scholarship perspective, what it tells us is that, these moments might actually quiet the person's kind of threat vigilance system and instead activates a more affiliative system that orient the person toward care and connection. And so it is these moments where compassionate self-responding emerges, right? So on the flip side, we have minority stress experience as well. And this is what one of our participants shared. She said, I saw a news post on Facebook about 10 Hong Kong LGBT couples getting married. Most of the comments were malicious and discriminatory, and these comments really upset me. I felt angry and helpless. As you can see, these events really signal threats and rejection. And so what it does is that it would activate a person's kind of defense-oriented system and also trigger uncompassionate self-responding for the purpose of self-protection. So with this formulation, our team really tried to test. So how do these variety of identity salient experiences actually impact folks' mental health and also physical health? And so we tested self-compassionate mind state as a potential mechanism. So what we did is that we recruited over 140 local queer and trans adults, and where they engaged in these ecological momentary assessment over 14 days. They completed brief check-in surveys 3 times daily, reporting on their mood, self-compassionate mind state, as well as whether there's any identity salient experiences present over the assessment window. So after we analyzed the data, what we found is that, the effect of affirming versus stressful identity salient experiences impact on health is through distinct pathways. So on the pathway above, you can see that affirming identity salient experiences positively predicted affective well-being through compassionate self-responding in a longitudinal sense. Whereas stressful identity salient experiences, such as discrimination, actually negatively impacted well-being outcomes through uncompassionate self-responding. So what this suggests is that, they impact health outcomes really distinctively. And so kind of reiterate what I said earlier in the beginning of our presentation, if we simply address discrimination and minority stress, that seems not sufficient in promoting the health of SGD individuals. So it really invites us to be creative to see how we can actually built in more cues of social safeness, in promoting health. So this also led us to the next question. So now that we know that identity affirming experiences can benefit minority mental health, so will there be conditions under which it would work better for certain individuals, but less for some other individuals, right? So we're looking into potential moderating effect, and we looked at early exposure to minority stress as a potential barrier that might impede the benefits of identity affirming experiences. So based on a separate sample of queer and trans adults, we asked these participants to first fill in a baseline survey where they would report on their early exposure to heterosexism experiences, like facing discrimination at home or at school or in their faith community before age 18. Okay, so and after this baseline survey, 2 weeks later, they would came to our lab, undergoing through 3 randomized writing conditions where they wrote about recently perceived affirmation, discrimination, and neutral story, which would be considered as a reference group or condition. And after each task, they would also report their emotional and cognitive responses with various measures. What we found was really interesting and important is that individuals with high early heterosexism experiences actually show weaker benefits after writing these affirming experiences. As you can see that these boosts in queer collective self-esteem, as you can see in the figure, and also reduction in rumination, as well as improvement in affect. As you can see in the lines in black color, they're all more flat. So the effect is less pronounced among these folks who have higher early exposure to stigma. Okay. And as compared to folks who are, having lower levels of these early exposure to stigma. So it really kind of tells us that early stigma might actually make it more harder for these affirming experiences to land right away. So what does it mean for practice? Okay, so the takeaway here is that folks who have early minority stress experiences, it might actually take more time and also consistent compassion for folks to internalize affirming and supportive experiences. And it also invites clinician to be more mindful of the function of discrimination and affirmation, and it may not function the same for each individuals. And to conclude, our team also takes the next step to kind of build on the learning that we have from this project and hoping to deepen our understanding of mental health needs and resilience toward ethnically diverse youth communities in Hong Kong. And so if you still recall the example I offered earlier regarding the Chinese medicine practitioner, the hope is that we could channel and, kind of this doctor's responsiveness and also attunement so that we can, as a collective, foster sociocultural diversity awareness, not just within mental health profession, but beyond. So thank you very much.